David Morris, he's Vice President of the Institute.
The Institute
for Local Self-Reliance.
The Institute for Local Self-Reliance.
The Institute for Local Self-Reliance.
Local self-reliance is essentially
another word for democracy. It means self-government.
The ability of a community to make its own decisions.
Building homegrown economies.
To create a more sustainable community.
In some ways, the American dream. The idea that you have the capacity
to say, this is what we want for our future, and to have the freedom to go make it happen.
And while you're doing it, make friends and neighbors.
It all started here. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance was born in a city that was coming into its own, that was gaining a certain amount of authority, that was agitated, that was angry, that was organized.
We all lived in Adams Morgan, and we were all working on community projects. And we realized that there were three areas of the community that no one was focusing on: food production, recycling, and energy.
One thing we did was use the roof and put solar collectors. We grew food on the roof as well. We had a Clivus Multrum composting toilet, a massive thing. And at about 4 o'clock every afternoon, the staff got together and we harvested our sprouts. We packaged them and we brought them to a local grocery store to be sold.
Waste was under the control of the city. All of our work in waste was integrated into community development. We expanded it, obviously, to recycling and economic development. And then when the city started saying we don't need to recycle, we're going to build an incinerator, that got us involved in the anti-incineration movement. And for many years, we were the only national organization fighting incinerators.
The incinerators were planned in predominantly African-American, low-income urban cities. The groups fighting them, the grassroots groups, they were amazing. They weren't just not in my backyard, they were like not in anybody's backyard. Let's fight for solutions.
We were involved in 35 successful fights across the country. And by 1985, more incinerators were canceled than were planned.
When we set up in 1974, we had just gone through an oil embargo, quadrupling in oil prices. We were promoting decentralized generation systems, and we decided that there was this technology which could generate electricity when struck by sunlight. The Institute was one of the leaders in the country in the 1970s in trying to get the federal government to drive the price of solar cells down. And they were moving toward it, and then Ronald Reagan came into office. So by the end of the 1970s, we were a national organization, and in the early 80s, we essentially set up an office in Minnesota, which became really our headquarters.
ILSR ended up in Minnesota because David Morris had a project to work with Mayor Latimer in St. Paul to essentially implement local self-reliance in a city. And so it seemed like a nice laboratory that we could use at the Institute. The Capitol is right in town. We were doing all sorts of legislative, policy, and research work related to increasing renewable energy development in Minnesota and working on climate change solutions.
In the 1990s, the whole world was moving in a very different direction from ILSR. In the 90s, there was this sense of bigger is better. Like, we need bigger businesses, we need globalization. So ILSR was very much, in those years, an outlier. We were not welcome at a lot of tables, particularly at the national level. What was interesting is that at the local level, it was a very different story.
We have made rules.
David Morris had launched this program called the New Rules Project.
The idea behind the New Rules Project and behind ILSR's work, which is, can we describe the value of certain policies that focus on local self-reliance, and then can we get communities to adopt them on the basis of our research and our recommendations. And then there was also some direct technical assistance work.
In 2004, I took a week-long composting course based on how to compost. But after I took the course, I was like, this is not rocket science. We should be promoting this everywhere. It became such an opportunity to actually move high diversion levels and keep those community assets locally by going all in on the composting work.
Out of the New Rules Project grew the broadband initiative, grew our energy program, grew the independent business program. So it was a very fruitful time in the organization's history.
I think David had recognized a long time ago that the internet would change everything, but only if it was able to be available to everyone on reasonable terms. And that's why we need networks to be locally self-reliant. I think the power of the monopolies, the way that they set the agenda for the country after the financial meltdown, that really led to a lot of people's eyes being opened into the raw power of these companies.
And as people began looking around for how do we explain the world we're in and what do we do now, ILSR had a set of answers because we had for many years been advocating for a different approach.
The Institute's focus from the very beginning was on decentralized production, decentralized authority.
This belief that we needed to disperse economic power just as much as political power. That was a key part of a democracy.
I started thinking about and talking more about in the energy work about the power of utility companies, that analysis of corporate power and how it impacted our ability to be successful.
In broadband, that was obvious because your bill goes up every year and no one will answer the phone call if you're calling the big cable company. This is even more important when it comes to historically marginalized people. When we deny high-quality internet access to low-income people, we're creating a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots.
The waste hauling industry is getting more and more concentrated, and we have been one of the few groups kind of pulling back the curtain.
There began to be a broader national conversation, partly because of us and our allies really pushing that into the conversation at that moment. This word monopoly, which had only really been a board game, for my entire life, began to be part of a national conversation. We're talking about the fact that do we really want corporations to have the kind of power that Walmart has, the kind of power that Amazon has? And once that's the framework of the conversation, we win that argument.
I keep thinking of it as like a 1-2 punch now, that we are about building local power, but we are also about fighting corporate power. We can't be successful with one without the other.
It's been an amazing ride seeing our organization grow.
The organization started becoming more prominent in the late 2010s as a whole, at the same time that the individual programs were growing.
A big part of how we've done our research is by being in touch with business owners and people on the ground, and this network of small business organizations that we help put together that now represents, I think, about 300,000 small businesses.
A few years ago, we just had a dozen members of our Community Composter Coalition, and now we have more than 300 members in 46 states and a handful of countries.
In the early 2010s, we were at a situation where solar was becoming very cost competitive. It was a great opportunity to kind of re-up our focus on self-reliance around clean energy, and solar became the natural technology for that. We entered into that moment and spoke powerfully about what we thought could happen, specifically do it in a locally focused and equitable way. A lot of what we asked for became realized in the Inflation Reduction Act and the laws that Congress passed.
We launched the Tribal Wireless Boot Camp over the summer of 2021. We've now held 11, and we've worked with more than 300 people, more than 65 tribes, and now they're connecting with each other and talking without us being in the loop.
So over the last couple of years, one of the things that's been important is to really find a way to help lift up the stories of the people behind our reports. I was looking at some of our old work, and there's a really great report from some work that we did in New Jersey back in the 1980s. And even just on the cover, there's a young black male envisioning like what was possible for his community. As we celebrate 50 years, we're returning to that like front cover, front and center. This is why we do what we do, and these are the people that are going to most benefit from the building local power. I guess it was like all there from the beginning. You know, you think about the solar panels and the composting toilet, and it's interesting. It's like the seeds that the founders planted, 50 years ago are continuing to grow.
Certainly one would say, well, that's just a little anecdote, but a little anecdote here and a little anecdote there, and before you know it, you're feeling good about what the possibilities are.